Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Creg Stephenson of AL.com, the Mobile Press Register. Creg, how are you this morning, man?
Doing great. How about you?
Hey, doing fine. I appreciate you coming on. Wanted to talk a little South Alabama football with you a little bit. Opening day now about a week away. The Jaguars coming into Mississippi for the second straight year after a big win and start last year. Now they'll be at Ole Miss. Tell us a little bit about South Alabama, what kind of team Ole Miss fans should expect to see. One thing I've noticed in some of your coverage is they had a quarterback competition, but it wasn't one where there was a highly ranked freshman or a redshirt freshman who had been kind of waiting in the wings. They had three juniors going for the position. Tell us a little bit about that competition.
Yeah, it was the same three guys who were going for it last year: Dallas Davis, Cole Garvin, and Evan Orth. And Davis is a guy they signed out of high school out of Panama City a few years ago. Cole Garvin originally signed with Marshall and transferred after his redshirt freshman year. And then Evan Orth, who's the younger brother of Perry Orth, the former South Carolina quarterback, signed with UAB out of high school and then came down here when UAB canceled its program a few years ago. So Davis won the job last year, led that win over Mississippi State. Got hurt early in the year. He had turf toe, then injured his shoulder. So Garvin played a few games. He engineered the big upset of San Diego State here in early October. But once Davis was healthy, he took back over and quarterbacked the rest of the year. However, it ended up that he had a torn labrum, so he had shoulder surgery in January, missed the spring. And, coming into the fall, it looked like he just wasn't completely healthy, didn't have as much zip on his throws as he needed, and they ended up giving the job to Garvin. They named him the starter. I would say that's a mild surprise, but when you consider that Davis is not 100% healthy, it's maybe not that surprising. So it's going to be Cole Garvin, junior out of the Atlanta area. He went to the same high school as Calvin Johnson, the great Detroit Lions wide receiver. So a really good program in the Atlanta area. 6'1", about 205, really good arm. Not much of a runner, but really kind of a brash gunslinger kind of guy who can make the throws and, maybe gives them a little bit more of a threat down the field than they had with Davis.
What should we look for offensively from the Jaguars? As I look at Ole Miss going into this camp, one of the big storylines has been the run game on both sides of the ball. Can the Rebels run it better under new offensive coordinator Phil Longo? And can they stop the run? That's been the bigger issue, really. So what kind of rushing offense will South Alabama bring into this game, and how intentional will they be with running the football?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, they lost almost all of their receivers, so they are definitely more experienced in the backfield. They are making a concerted effort to run the ball this year. Xavier Johnson, who's a senior, probably will be the all-time leading rusher in program history by the time he's done this year. And of course, it's a new program. They've only been around less than a decade. They brought in a guy named Trey Minner out of the Kansas Junior College ranks, who was second nationally in rushing last year. He's really made a big impression in camp. And then another guy that your readers and listeners might be more familiar with, Tywin Walters, was at Northwest Mississippi Community College last year. Probably will be the number 3 guy. So that group, they hope they can run the ball better. The offensive line last year was really banged up. I think they only had one starter who played in all 12 games. So they've been mostly healthy this year, although their right guard is a little banged up, Nelson Santiago. But for the most part, they're healthy. So I think they want to run the ball better. They should be able to run the ball better. And with inexperience at receiver, they probably have to run the ball better.
Tell us about South Alabama defensively. How successful were they last year? What do you expect from them on that side of the ball?
Again, this is something that's going to be familiar to Ole Miss fans. Kane Womack, the son of Dave Womack, is the defensive coordinator. Came in last year and he put in that 4-2-5 attacking style of defense that Ole Miss ran and had some success with it. They weren't a great defense, but they really improved over what they had been the year before. They did a great job of getting pressure on the quarterback. They had a veteran secondary that was able to clean up and make plays in the back end. So, on the good side, they definitely have a lot more depth than they had last year. Just like the offensive line, the defensive line got really banged up last year. They lost 4 key guys even before training camp started to season-ending injuries, and they've got 3 of those guys actually are back this year. Plus, they had a lot of younger guys who had to play last year that have been kind of forced into new roles. So it's I think they will be better defensively. Daryl Sanji, the middle linebacker who transferred from Oregon State, is a really solid player. Jeremy Reeves, who began his career as a cornerback but has been moved to the rover safety, is a 3-year starter. One of the better players in the Sun Belt. Their biggest issue, though, is going to be at cornerback. Their number 1 corner, Jalen Thompson, is academically ineligible. Their number 2 cornerback, Bobby Flott, had a knee injury in the spring that he's just now getting over. So you may see some young guys in the secondary, and one of those is actually Devin Rocket from Oxford High School. He's a guy that's been getting some time in the fall. Obviously Kane Womack can recruit that area because he knows that area. Gus Nave is another guy from North Mississippi out of Kemper County, probably going to play quite a bit. So, Ole Miss obviously has a lot of big, tall, fast receivers, and South Alabama is inexperienced at cornerback. So maybe that's somewhere where Ole Miss can certainly exploit them.
Yeah, Kane Womack certainly will be familiar with Ole Miss. And there is a new coordinator on offense in Phil Longo, but it's still a tempo offense, and he's going to know a little bit about personnel and things of that nature. So good guy, very good guy, Kane Womack. Listen, you mentioned that this is not a traditional college football program. Tell us a little bit about just kind of the growth of South Alabama football. It seems like the Jags reached Division I fairly quickly. How is the program supported in Mobile?
Yeah, they kind of took the UAB track where they didn't, go like a Troy or and Southern Miss even way back, build themselves through the lower ranks and then move up. They actually began life more or less as a Division I program. They did have a couple of transitional years where they were playing junior college teams and Division III in small schools. But as of about 4 or 5 years ago, they moved right into the Sun Belt. Have had a reasonable degree of success, but they've kind of stagnated the last few years. I think they've been 5-7 or 6-7 now, 4 years in a row. Joey Jones, the head coach, is the only coach in program history, the former Alabama star from the early 80s, also a longtime successful high school coach in the state. So this is really a key year for them. When they have played an SEC type team, they had Mississippi State here a couple of years ago, and they packed Ladd-Peebles Stadium. Troy was here for a midweek game last year. They had a really good crowd. But in general, it's been difficult to get a lot of support since it's a new program. In existence less than 10 years. A lot of the, not counting the students, but the local fan base, those people are already aligned with Alabama and Auburn. And if South Alabama's playing a home game at in that same window where Alabama or Auburn is playing on television, it's difficult to get people to come out.
Craig, what's your take on football in the Sun Belt Conference?
It's very top heavy. You have some quality programs. Appalachian State is a team that has moved up from the FCS level and have been really successful. Arkansas State, the program that produced Hugh Freeze and Gus Malzahn, has had a lot of success. Troy has come on in the last few years. South Alabama's kind of in that mid-range, but the lower half of the conference, Louisiana, Monroe.
You're hurting me there, Craig.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah. We'll forget about that. But Texas State, Georgia State, the bottom half is not very strong. So if you don't finish in that top 4 or 5, you have to wonder, do you really have it going as a Division I program?
I see some coverage a little bit that seems to think that Matt Viator could have Louisiana Monroe on the right track. Are you familiar enough with what's going on in Monroe? Is there some improvement there?
They beat South Alabama last year, so it's it's certainly possible. They don't really have anywhere to go but up based on where they were a few years ago. And I think, it's all about having the right coach in some of those places. Georgia State is in Atlanta. You would think they could get it together if they could, steal at least get the leftovers from the SEC programs. And of course, Texas State is in Texas. So you would think they would have a good recruiting base, but it's hard to crack into that top 2 or 3. Arkansas State and Appalachian State and then Georgia Southern to a degree, although they fell off last year. They've really kind of had things locked down at the top of the conference the last few years.
Hey, Greg, one more question, man, and we'll let you go. I appreciate you being with us this morning. Tell us a little bit about the South Alabama-Mississippi State game last year, because obviously it will be a South Al team that comes to Oxford, comfortable in the environment, at least with most of its players, having experienced, the larger venues before and then success in Starkville last year. What helped South Alabama be successful in that game?
As you said, there's a lot of guys on this team that went up there and had success last year, so they won't be intimidated by the environment. At the same time, they're probably not going to sneak up on Ole Miss the way they did Mississippi State last year. It was an early game, first game of the year. The Mississippi State coaching staff came out in shorts, for the game, which really kind of lent to the idea that they weren't taking it very seriously. I mean, I've had South Alabama players and coaches say, hey, when we saw them, we knew they weren't into this thing. So, but that won't be the case this year. Obviously, you have to wonder, and you're around the program a lot more than I am at Ole Miss. You have to wonder what frame of mind they might be in. But I don't think that's an issue this early in the year. Maybe if things started going badly as the season went along, South Alabama played this Ole Miss team in November, they might have a better shot at really playing a team that's checked out. And Mississippi State, in a lot of ways, gave that game away last year. Of course, they missed the extra point on the last play of the game. So it was really kind of a perfect storm for South Alabama. If it, can it repeat itself? It's hard to say. But part of that is going to be what kind of shape mentally Ole Miss is.
Craig, thanks so much for being with us, man. We appreciate you coming on.
All right. No problem. Enjoyed it. Talk to you later. I'll see you in Oxford in about a week.